All right, we're going to look at some examples now of solving quadratics by taking square roots, and I'm going to walk you through the steps here. The first thing you're going to want to do is isolate the term or expression being squared on one side of the equation. Right now, we're going to start out with just the variable being squared, but in a minute we'll get to some parenthetical expressions that are being squared, and that's what we'll isolate, and that will make more sense here in a minute when we see an example. But for right now, the first thing we're going to do is isolate the term or expression being squared on one side of the equation. Then we are going to take the square root of both sides. Now remember, you need to include both positive and negative values for the constant that you're taking the square root of. Because if I look at that first example, if I take the square root of 9, the answer is both positive 3 and negative 3. Because when I square positive 3, I get 9. But also when I square negative 3, I get 9. So remember to include the positive and negative results after you take the square root. And then finally, we're going to finish solving for both the positive and negative solutions. All right, so guys, that first example, if we look at it, I've got x squared equals 9. So this is a quadratic. It's a very simple, basic one. So x squared equals 9. First of all, isolate the term or expression being squared. All right, so it's already isolated on one side of the equation. I've got x squared by itself on the left side. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides, okay? I take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to say the square root of x squared is x, because basically the square root and the square cancel each other out, okay? So I'm left with x. Now the right side, remember, it's going to be positive or negative 3. So there is your answer, essentially. X is positive 3, or x is negative 3. All right, so that's how you do it. So let's look at the next example here. Isolate the term or expression being squared on one side of the equation. Here I've got x squared minus 1 equals 24. Well, I need to get that x squared by itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 to both sides of the equation. So now I've got x squared equals 25. Okay, so I've taken care of that step. X squared equals 25. All right, now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So remember, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is, remember, positive or negative 5. So in this case, x equals positive 5 or x equals negative 5. All right, let's look at a couple more examples like this that are fairly straightforward. I've got 3x squared plus 7 equals 55. All right, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. That's going to give me 3x squared equals 48. Okay. Then the next thing I need to do is divide both sides by 3 because I want to get that x squared by itself. Okay, so that's going to give me x squared equals 16. When I divide both sides by 3, the 3 goes away on the left-hand side, and 48 divided by 3 is 16. So now I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to end up with x equals plus or minus 4. You don't always have to write them out separately the way I did up here, positive 5 or negative 5, positive 3 or negative 3. A lot of times you can just leave that plus or minus 4 sign there like that. Okay? Let's look at one more example like this where you've just got to isolate the variable. Okay? It's going to be our fourth example here. So I've got negative 2x squared plus 15 equals x squared minus 12. Well, I still want to isolate the quadratic term on one side of the equation. So let's just go ahead and move it over here to the left-hand side, okay? So I can subtract x squared from both sides. That's going to leave me with negative 3x squared because I've got negative 2x minus 1x. So negative 2x squared minus 1x squared gives me negative 3x squared. Okay, so plus 15 equals negative 12. All right, I'm not done isolating. I've got a couple more steps I need to take. I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. That's going to give me negative 3x squared equals negative 27. I'm going to go ahead and bring that over here. Negative 3x squared equals negative 27. All right, still not done isolating the quadratic term. Right now there's a negative 3 in front of it, so I can divide both sides by negative 3. All right, when I do that, now I've got the x squared by itself, and negative 27 divided by negative 3 is going to give me positive 9. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of x squared, the square root of 9. The square root of x squared is x, so x is going to be positive or negative 3. All right? Now, if you want to check your answers, you can always plug them back in and see if it works, okay? Just realize that if you square a positive or a negative, you're still going to end up with a positive once you square it, okay? All right, we'll continue some more examples in just a second.